I'm Dr. Melissa Longo. Welcome to Everyday Rockstar Moms, where every episode I'll interview moms just like you who are rocking it in their homes, raising their children, managing their households, building their careers, working on their relationships, dealing with challenges, finding success, trying to find balance, and themselves along the way. Every episode you'll hear from women just like you of all ages and stages of motherhood, sharing their stories, life experiences, and leaving you with practical tips, ideas, and inspiration to help you rock your life. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Lia Sonnenburg. Lia is the mother of two boys, ages 2 and 4 years old. She's happily married to a great guy and running her own practice as a doctor of naturopathic medicine. Today, she shares her ideas about how motherhood has given her more confidence as a woman, how it's given her so much joy, how she juggles running a business with a toddler and a 4-year-old, and how she managed to make her family life, marriage, and career all seamlessly work together. We also discuss some of the tips she gives her female patients, the importance of taking care of our basic needs as human beings, how to create boundaries in your life for people's opinions about how you raise your family, and so much more. Lia is a warm woman with lots of wisdom. You'll hear it in her voice today. I loved chatting with her. I think you'll love today's episode. Take a listen. Hi, Lia. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for being here. I wanted our listeners to hear about your practice and your story and all the good information that you share with the people that you work with. But perhaps to start, you can just give us a little bit of a snapshot about where things are at right now for you in your life with regards to your boys, your husband, your practice.
Sure. Yeah. It's busy. It's awesome. I'm totally happy with where my life is right now, but I have to say it is very busy because I am working part-time. I'm seeing patients part-time, and then I'm with the boys part-time. So I have sort of a perfect life balance, but it certainly does take a lot of juggling.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get into that today. How old are your boys right now?
4 and almost 2. So one is in school full time and the other one is with me a good portion of the time and then in daycare when I'm working. Mm-hmm.
So you've talked already about juggling it and finding the balance. It sounds to me a little bit that you splitting your time and only being in your practice part-time now and spending the rest of your time with your boys. Is that a choice that you made to sacrifice a bit of your work right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I want to be present for the patients that I have, but I also want to be present for being a mom. And I learned that especially quickly early on that, it just flies by. Every stage just totally flies by. So I sort of designed my own life balance around being able to do both the way I wanted to.
What types of things did you have to deliberately give up, if you will, or are there things that you consistently have to say no to make that balance work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm a bit of an education addict, and so I've always been really interested in what I do, and I've always wanted to do continuing education and other courses. And those are some things I've had to the specializations I've had to slow down on because I did specialize in oncology, but I've been putting off some of those more intensive courses that I will do probably in the future. And so I have cut back a bit on some of my passions. But I've also maintained a lot of other passions that I have too. So I've found a bit of a balance through just, enjoying the day-to-day for now.
Yeah, it's I agree with you. I think that so many times as moms we have to split our time, and it can be really difficult for moms when their little people are little to make that transition. But I think looking back, not a single woman regrets it.
No, absolutely not. It's such a gift to be a mother, and your role is just imperative in their formulary years. So being present is the biggest gift you can give to your kid.
Was it hard for you to make the decision to slow down your practice?
Not really, because I wasn't like I really had to slow it down. I think by virtue of what we do, it's just so busy. in school, and then we end up graduating around the time where you're ready for motherhood. So I always knew I wanted to be a mother, and I sort of designed my practice around that. So I was a little bit busier before I had kids, but it really was manageable to scale down to where I have, just because I always knew that I was going to need that time to be at home.
Sounds like you created an intention around the kind of family life, work life that you wanted, and you've designed your life exactly according to that model. Would you say that was how you set out?
It's an interesting statement because I don't know that I was totally conscious of that, but I think I was in some manner. And yes, I guess my answer would be
Yeah.
yes. I always knew that I wanted to be a mom, and that was important to me. And I always saw that as an important thing practicing as a naturopathic doctor. When I'm dealing with pediatric patients and with families, I think that role is so important, and it takes time and it takes effort. And I just wanted to sort of practice what I preached too.
It sounds like you're very congruent, and it gives you a lot of real life experience that you can translate into the families that you work with.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, every kid's different, every family's different, every dynamic is different, but for sure, when you can speak from a place of knowledge or understanding, I think that goes pretty far.
Has mothering been what you expected it to be?
I don't know that I really had a ton of expectations. I guess in some ways it might have exceeded my expectations, the capacity of love that you have and the amount of self-confidence that it gives you and all of that.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting statement because I think so many women are afraid of losing their sense of self when they become a mother, because ultimately, especially in those first few years, if not forever, your time for yourself can become limited, and it often takes a back seat for a lot of women.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a really good paradox. But I think, from every struggle and every hurdle, there's something to be learned. So if you look at the snapshot of the day to day of being a mom, you struggle with, am I making the right decision? Is this the way that I should be doing things? You have a lot of questions, but I think over time, you gain a certain confidence because you do have to ultimately answer those questions and continue on in your role. You can't really step out of it. So I think, yeah, you can certainly learn, well, not learn, but become more self-confident as a mother as time goes by.
I found that as much as I knew about pediatrics and healthcare, I was pregnant during my last year of my internship. Nothing prepares you for when this little person actually comes into your life, and how you feel as a woman and as a mother is different when it's your own child. Would you say something like that happened for you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but I had sort of already tried to sort of abandon the expectations or the idea of expectations, and I was there for the journey, to experience it in every form. There were certainly difficulties, though.
What would you say it was one of, excuse me, one of your biggest struggles as a mom?
I think my biggest struggle, for sure, and I talk to patients about this all the time, is that I was in school for so long, like 9 years of schools, and which is very self-directed. And you have commitments, you have to show up for tests, you have to do things, but it's your time is very much managed. And then you go on and to become, for myself, an entrepreneur where I could, make my time and my schedule. So to go from a very self-directed life to one that's completely directed around this completely irrational being was a really hard adjustment, because suddenly I was like, wait, I can't call the shots here. Somebody else is, and they have needs that need to be met before mine, and otherwise my needs don't get met. So that was the hardest thing for me to transition to just having sort of a very egotistical life, I guess, or a very self-centered, self-focused, self-directed life to a baby-directed life.
And these days, with that, have that behind you, what types of strategies do you use day to day to sort of keep some sense of balance for yourself? You know, if there was tips that you had that help you perform, at your peak in your practice as a mom, what would you suggest they would be?
Mm. Well, I always think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I try and make sure that the bottom of my pyramid, that foundation is nice and strong. So, like, just the basics, sleep.
So how do you
Eating.
manage that with two young boys?
Well, we've just sort of turned the corner here. We've always had really good sleepers, but they just they like to get up early. So I think it was really about training myself to go to sleep instead of staying up late. So I think that's part of finding your niche. I know how important self-care is, and I preach self-care, and I think it's very important for moms to take time to fill up their cup. But for me, I would always find that time at the end of the day once the kids had gone to bed. So I had to sort of build it in a different place because I needed to go to bed when they went to bed. And so my tips are like, get it in when you can, when you have the opportunity. So I'm trying to do that during my day to day. So I'll book, an hour off of my schedule at work so that I can go to a yoga class instead of trying to, put them to bed and rush out to go to a yoga class because I need to actually sleep during that time. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so blocking my schedule. I find I don't do it often, maybe once a month, twice a month, but it gives me something to look forward to, and it really helps meet my needs. So figuring out the things that work for you and making sure your basic needs are being met, that would be my advice.
Yeah, and it's something that you and I have chatted about is so vital for moms. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Why you believe that self-care is so important for women's health and for the health of their families?
Yeah, if mom's the pinnacle of the family or the center point, and if mom's not balanced, everybody else is going to be out of whack too eventually. And it's just so important. And maybe that's a really old school way of looking at it.
I think it's pretty accurate though, still today, and it's not negating any of the wonderful things that dads do.
Yeah.
But it seems to me like a lot of women are taking on multiple roles within their household and their life.
Yeah, and it's hard because they're wearing a lot of different hats, um, and often all at once. So yeah, I think it's really important for moms to invest in themselves, and I think busyness can be a trap. I mean, we can all be busy, and we all are busy, but it can be a trap and it can be an excuse. And just like the years of our child's lives blow by, our lives can blow by too, and then all of a sudden you don't recognize the person in the mirror. So it's important to foster that relationship that you have with yourself. And that's when you'll grow too. So when you have those hurdles that we talked about before, when you're having to cross hurdles and you're dealing with self-doubt, I think when you invest in yourself and then you become, a bit more grounded in your beliefs and your values, you become more self-confident as a mother.
Yeah, it's valuable. I can't stress it enough to the moms I work with. Just to give you that sense of who you are as a person, but to make sure, as you said, that with the hierarchy of needs, that your basic needs are being met. Are you eating the right foods? Are you trying to get some sleep? Are you moving your body? Are you focusing on, lowering your stress where however you can? It's yeah, it's vitally important, I believe. So, having said all that, you're doing lots of different things to give yourself some self balance, if you can, some family balance. What gives you the most amount of joy these days?
Oh, the most amount of joy, given given the weather today, the sunshine.
Yeah.
Um, Absolutely. I love being outdoors. It really recharges me. So when I'm with the boys, we spend almost most of our day outside, and it's really quite awesome. And just watching them grow gives me a lot of joy. And then also, the challenges that practice brings or the challenges that life may bring, and then coming through the other side, that's great. Like, I'm not much of an athlete, but I do try and, stay fit.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling when you finish a race is just amazing, and it's not like I want to be a pro athlete by any means, but it's cool to challenge yourself and to succeed. And those are the types of things that bring me joy. And then also to just watch the kids do that. That's amazing. It's just a beautiful part of life.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about a fellow who I'm sure brings you some joy. You are married.
Yes.
Yes. You're married
Yes.
to a good guy. And let's talk about how you guys have two young kids and you're working, and how do you maintain some sense of relationship connection?
I'm really blessed in this area of my life. I've got an amazing partner, and he's just incredibly supportive in all aspects, and we communicate well. I mean, we're not always the same type of communicator, but we've learned a lot about each other, and even though sometimes it feels like we're just passing each other,
Mm-hmm.
I'm at home during the days sometimes and speed off to work as he rushes in the door, and we have sort of this verbal, quick dialogue about who's been fed, who needs to have a bowel movement, who needs to be walked. And so a lot of the time we're talking about kids.
Really sexy stuff there.
Yes, really. Yeah. But we have great people in our corner. Like my in-laws live in town, and my parents often come to visit. And when they do, they understand the importance of fostering relationships, and we get out and we get to have a nice dinner together, or we play soccer together every Friday night, and have somebody come and watch the kids. So we have sort of these built-in active date nights often.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important because we both can just kind of exercise and hang out together. And that keeps us buddies, so to speak.
Yeah, that sounds great. It's nice to have a support team
Mm-hmm.
around you to help you guys stay connected and nurture your time. That can be often one of the biggest challenges I think new families have, is just finding the right childcare.
Yes. Yeah. And in that, we're really fortunate. And and especially with grandparents, they love helping. At least our grandparents love helping. So it was really hard for me in the beginning to ask for help, because I was just sort of felt like this was what being a mom was. You had to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you see the joy on their face, and they love being needed, at least our grandparents on our side do. So we feel really blessed and fortunate to have them, and the kids love them.
Who would you say would be some of the greatest influences in your life today as a mother? Like, a lot of people have family members or girlfriends or, mentors. Anyone that stands out for you, or several people?
Oh, probably several for sure. I think probably primarily about the women in my family on my side. And my mom definitely always encouraged me to be very independent and to really go for my goals and my dreams. And then my grandmother was really influential because I just loved hanging out with her, and she loved hanging out with me. And it just seemed like everything she did in her day-to-day, just the routine of day-to-day, she had this smile on her face and joy. And it was just like she enjoyed sharing that with me. And so I've tried to remember that in those ordinary days, and how much fun we had on those ordinary days just because she was there.
Are there things that you use to anchor you and give you that reminder, or anything like, sometimes I'll use photos. One of my grandfathers was like that for me, and I have, little remembrances of him throughout my home and workspace even. Do you use anything like that to anchor you, or anything, a favorite quote or something that, has inspired you and helped you get through some of those tough mornings when, you got no sleep and work to do? And
Certainly. I think with regard to my grandmother, I spent a lot of time with, she was a big gardener. I spent a lot of time gardening with her, and that's something I've continued doing, and I find it so therapeutic, and I love sharing it with the kids. And we can go outside and dig around and pull weeds and look at worms, and so that in the summer, spring and fall is good for me therapeutically, and it just reminds me of, our spot kind of in the big bad world.
Yeah, it keeps you connected to, when you're connected to the earth, it seems to ground us in lots of other places in our life, I find. When I'm in my garden, I feel the same.
Yeah. And I also like to talk about quotes. I think I had a bit of a Christian upbringing. And one of the quotes that I always think of is, God give me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that, as a parent, has really been a useful quote for me, because there's just some things that are completely out of your control, and you just need to accept that.
Have you ever had times when people have challenged you on some of your decisions you've made for your kids?
Absolutely, yeah. And I I've really worked on having firm boundaries around other people's opinions, because I think I spent a lot of my life with a very low self-confidence and being really susceptible to comments and opinions of other people. And as I grew as a professional, I realized how important it was for other people, and then also for myself, to set boundaries, because at the end of the day, it's not their life, it's your life. And you have to decide how much you're going to let that impact you. So I know that every time I, get an opinion from somebody else, I might not address it directly to them, but I certainly do need to do internal work just to see, check in and make sure my self-esteem is still intact.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, everyone has an opinion, and there's certainly no shortage of decisions that we have to make as parents, from schooling, from are you going to breastfeed, are you going to bottle feed, are you going to co-sleep, or, are they going to sleep in their own room, or schools are going to go to. It never ends. How are you going to discipline them? How are you going to the relationships, all that communication stuff, and there's opinions about everything, and so many women struggle with unwanted advice that they get from family members, from friends, but even strangers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember being in practice and people were like, "So, what are you going to name your child?" And the patients would be sort of like bickering back and forth about, "No, that's not a nice name. You should name them this. You should name
Yeah.
them."
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm glad you brought up setting up boundaries for yourself. I'm sure that's something that a lot of women will relate to. Have
Mm-hmm.
you, if you were to look back, it sounds to me like you've created a pretty fantastic life for yourself. You're doing some work that brings you a tremendous amount of happiness. You've got 2 boys that you adore and a wonderful partner. Anything that you would do differently if you could, or if you were to turn back, the clocks, and before you had kids, like anything that would you like to go back and say to your younger self?
Um, there's probably a lot of things I would like to say to my younger self, but I'm not sure that my younger self would have really listened, um, because I think I knew in my head that kids grow up quickly and that it's dynamic, but I didn't know it in my heart until I actually experienced it. So I think if I went back to my younger self, I would say, just slow down, stop, enjoy it. You don't need to rush through it. You don't, because I think getting to where I am now is a bit of a struggle to figure out how to balance the professional world and the family world. And I was eager to just be an expert at both. And I've definitely put the brakes on that with the second child. And so that would be sort of something I would press upon my younger self.
Well, and I imagine through your clinical practice too that you see a lot of women who are stressed or
Mm-hmm.
dealing with anxiety or depression or other emotional challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a ton of that. Mm-hmm.
And do you have any specific strategies that women you recommend for them? I mean, obviously each case is different, but if we see that a lot of women are juggling a lot of different roles, as we've said, and feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed, are there, like, let's say 3 things that you recommend to majority of your mother type clients in your practice?
Yeah. I try and take it back to a really basic level. Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And asking sort of I ask a lot of questions in practice and just trying to get to the root of what that's at, because sometimes the expectations women place on themselves are just unrealistic, and they come from a place that often they're not even in tune with. They might think they have to do it a certain way because that's the expectation of their partner or of their parents and their own expectations. So trying to figure out, whether the anxiety is caused by certain expectations and how congruent those expectations are with the person's values and beliefs.
Really getting it back to, are they living authentically, it sounds like.
Yeah, and then asking, if you could design your life, how would you design it, and then seeing, the dissonance between the two. How far are we from one to the other, and what can we do to bridge that gap? So, but certainly, as we discussed before, like, just those basic needs need to be met, and oftentimes I find they're not. Women aren't sleeping, or they don't have time to feed themselves. They're rushing around trying to make snacks or deliver kids places. So dealing with those basic needs can be a big part of dealing with anxiety and depression. And
that sounds so simple, and yet it's so powerful, and I feel like it's overlooked by, so many women I know are trying to fit in, one more yoga class, or one more dinner with friends, or one more meeting at work, or another, opportunity. And really, as you said, maybe they just need some sleep.
Yeah.
Right? Or make sure that they're eating the right foods.
Yeah, and I think our culture has been talking a lot about the FOMO movement, the fear of missing out. And then there's that counterpart movement. That's the JOMO. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but the joy of missing out. So trying to find joy in missing out on things because, you're stepping back a little bit and allowing life to slow down, and allowing yourself to be more present in the moment, and feeling settled with your decision to miss out on something. We do talk a lot about JOMO.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I've really enjoyed chatting with you today, as I always do. I always learn something. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
I'm really honored. Thank you for having me. I don't know that I have any final thoughts, but I know that this whole thing is dynamic. It's a journey being a mom, and I don't think I have all the answers, but I've got a little bit figured out more than when I started.
You use that word dynamic, because I feel like it's a fluid, it's a constantly evolving. With the infants, you're always seeing them change. As soon as they get one routine, well, then they cut a tooth, or then they change their feeding habits. Like, something's always changing. And I think with my boys being, 9 and 13, they're constantly changing too. And dynamic is a great way to wrap it up there. Well, wishing you all the best in practice and with your family. And thanks again for being here today, Lia.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
There you have it, a great story today from a mom who rocks. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Be sure to head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. When you do that, I'll be sending you a copy of my top 10 tips for moms. These are some of my personal practical strategies I believe that as women we can all benefit from, and help us be emotionally and physically as healthy as we can be. When you're also there on iTunes, I would also love it if you left a review. It's really important to leave some reviews, because that helps other people find the podcast, and it helps inspire them to listen and potentially gain some insight from the podcast. Tell other moms that you know would benefit from this show, or most certainly nominate them and let me know who you think I should be interviewing. I'd love for you to connect with us on Facebook as well. Head on over to Everyday Rockstar Mom and join our community there. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.